Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7 o'clock.
Like you said, we won't have much of a.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7 o'clock.
We're in good shape.
Yeah. Our meeting.
Sandra?
Even some of the stuff.
Can't hear me. Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Father, can you read us some prayer, please? Oh, sorry. Start with the land acknowledgement. Sia, you're online. Can you read the land acknowledgement, please?
As we begin this meeting, let us respectfully acknowledge that the Ottawa Catholic School Board is located on traditional Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. We acknowledge the Algonquin people's long-standing relationship with this land, which remains unceded. We also pay respect to all Indigenous people, including the Métis and Inuit, from all regions across Canada that call Ottawa home.
Thank you. Father, can you lead us in prayer, please?
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks. Designer and sustainer of life, you are with us and welcome breezes of hope and parables of love acted out in the daily dramas of our life. You are with us in the gifts that create life. Bless it and keep it. In all these signs of resurrection, we hope and pray that we recognize your presence. Remind us that you are not a source of pain, but you are with us in the pain. You are where love is. Remind us that nothing in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of Christ Jesus, our Lord. Amen. And we recommend to your prayers the following persons who have passed away. Earl Smith, father of Tara Krager, learning partner in the Student Success Elementary Department. Robert Russell Eady, father-in-law of Sarah Eady, reading intervention itinerant teacher in the Student Success Elementary Department. Prabhaharuhaban Shanmugam, uncle of Charu Sivapalan, student trustee. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. May they rest in peace. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Please stand for O Canada. As I said earlier, student trustee Sia is joining us online. We have no delegations, no public session. Can I get a mover for the approval of the agenda, please? Trustee Coburn and Trustee Simpson. That the agenda of the regular board meeting of April 11, 2023 be approved as presented. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. School student departmental profile memo from the Superintendent of Planning and Facilities. Read deep learning features and new school designs. Welcome, Superintendent Vala and Mr. Wood. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, there we go. All right. It's my pleasure to present an overview of how deep learning pedagogy has been working in our new school designs throughout over the last few years. I have Don Wood, Architectural Project Coordinator here joining me to go through some of the features that we've incorporated in our schools, and we've shared with some of the other users or other stakeholders that have an interest in what we do. Our school board has been known to have innovation and some cost effectiveness. We've been known across the province for building schools that stay within construction benchmarks across the province and also bring in innovation. Back in 2012, after completing about 6 repeat designs, we undertook a new concept in incorporating some of the additional learning features we could put into our buildings over and above just building a cost-effective school. So previously we built 4 schools, the St. Cecilia, St. Dominic, St. Benedict, and St. Isabel, which featured some of the new innovations that focused on the school as a learning tool. We currently, as you know, have 4 new schools underway. We have the new schools, the Stittsville and St. Bernadette, the one in Barrhaven, which will be opening in January, which is St. Juan Diego, and Riverside South, which we just recently closed a tender, and Finley Creek, which we'll be moving forward with shortly as well. So we were tasked over the years to incorporate some of the deep learning concepts and incorporate them into the school design. And there were certain features that, without adding square footage, we could incorporate within the building to make the whole school usable as a classroom. You've seen this in the past where we've got a repeat design. And so with our sites, even though each site is different, we use a repeat feature on all of them in that we incorporate as much outdoor space, learning space, reduce the amount of pavement that we can, try to get our buses off the property, which we've done lately, so that we can add additional space in our backyard or side yard for kids to grow and incorporate new features that not only have learning spaces indoors and out. So I'd like to leave this now with Don, who will go through some of the features within the current design template. Well, before we go, we also have shared this with the province. We're looking at the best practices as well. It's Don.
Thank you. As Miro stated, we went through an iteration back in 2012 where it involved student services, elementary, the principals, teachers that were involved, and we came up with a new version of our repeat design where we created what we called the donut. So in the center of the donut is the gymnasium, the classrooms around the wing, and then down in the down on the other side to where the kindergartens and the childcare were located in their own wing. And we moved the learning commons to an outside wall to bring in more outdoor light. It was a tiered system of space, so we worked on doing large space groups, which were the gymnasium, the learning commons, and the largest of the pods, which are cooperative learning centers. Then we went to the medium-sized ones, which are the classrooms, where we've got classrooms with movable partition walls for co-teaching, plus the smaller pod spaces in front of each one of the clusters of classes. And then following that, there's the more intimate and smaller spaces, which we call caves, which are located along the outer wall of the gymnasium. And these are for small group or individual learning, as well as breakout spaces inside the individual classrooms. And these spaces were created by carving out and removing out the coat rooms areas, and also by decreasing the class space by a few feet to create larger incorporative spaces that everyone could use cooperatively. So we used the building as a learning opportunity. So what we did was we created spaces where, as you can see in these pictures, we exposed a foundation of the building. We brought in structural elements that can be seen, like the cross bracing. We put in a section of floor design so people can see how a floor assembly is created. We also put in a window onto the mechanical room where we incorporated a color design system so people could see how energy was being used and how we're having an impact on the environment. These are a few slides here, a couple of pictures of the cooperative and collaborative spaces that we have. So the idea was to make them brightly colored for enthusiasm for student activity, excuse me. These are the medium-sized spaces. So these would be the group activities. So 1, 2, or 3 classrooms could come together, work on a project or work on an activity all together. And they have flexible furniture. We do have monitors, or at the beginning we had smart boards. Now we have the active monitors in the spaces. We have the learning pods themselves, were small groups, and you can see the caves, which again get smaller on each individual pattern. So here we've got some pictures of the learning commons for the elementary school. These were, has a centralized smart board in the middle, so they could do presentations, they can work group activities. On the side, on the left hand, on the right-hand side of it, you'll see past that purple column, there's one of the small caves or closer spaces where people could go in, a little bit more quiet off of the active space for people who wanted to do some quiet learning in the environment. We have flexible, again, movable furniture. There's a folding partition that runs through the learning commons to close off the books and computers at nighttime and leave it open, the rest of the space open for the public. We have a double-sided work desk, which is a makerspace and cooperative center. And at the back, we have the natural light, which looks out over the back play yard. And we tried to incorporate these similar ideas into the secondary spaces. So this one here that you see, these are the floor plans and photographs from the St. Joe's edition. So the top left photograph shows how we widened out the corridors to make for informal student spaces for them to gather, crush space for them to have a small gathering, share information. Behind is what we call a student commons. And so in that area, there's some counters. A class can do a breakout into that area. They can work on a project and cooperatively. And then on the one that's on the angle in the middle picture, so those were what we called an angled cave. So that was kind of for more a spontaneity meeting, so somebody could go out, work quickly on something and come back in. It gave the teacher an opportunity to give a student some time alone too if they needed some testing or other things where they could be indirectly supervised outside. And the last picture shows the end of the corridor where it's again a flexible space for students to learn, and they look out again over the sports field. So we tried to bring in as much natural light into the hallway to make it much more appealing rather than a dark tunnel that you have to walk through. Thank you.
And just to continue, and we're trying to wrap up, and just to speak to some of the outdoor features in the last round of designs, we're incorporating outdoor learning spaces. So we've incorporated gardens and naturalized areas, creation of outdoor classrooms, some walking areas where kids can congregate and explore the yard. So we're trying to use both the indoors and the outdoors for kids to collaborate, to explore. And currently, we have been approved to invest in all of our schools for outdoor learning spaces. And we look forward to using our repeat designs to continue advancing pedagogy with the as-built environment. So there's another slide of the other school, and I think we'll turn this off. And that completes our presentation. Thank you for your time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Trustee Warren.
Thanks, through you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the presentation. It's nice to see, and I understand the cost savings by doing a repeat design, but have we actively sought feedback from these schools that have had these designs to see if areas such as the collaborative spaces are being properly utilized, or are we just making these assumptions, or do we actually get feedback from the schools with the current designs?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we've gone back, since we started the first of the designs, we've kept going back to student success, the principals, and incorporating staff at those schools to find out what worked and didn't work, or things that they found that could have been improved. We've added more acoustical treatment to some of the ceilings in the open spaces. We've gone back and made sure that the teachers that are in those spaces that have the divided wall are working team teaching. It's been stressed by the principals when we were doing the design that they wanted those flexible spaces. But we have gone back.
Just a supplemental. Do you happen to build a working group with those principals when coming up with the designs for the future of schools? Do you involve them actively to have kind of a collaborative discussion to say what does the future of the schools look like, but keep them within the same boundaries of the design? So to see if there's new improved ways we could utilize the space or the square footage that we have at these schools.
So yes, we do actively do it. We've continued to actively do it. We will continue again if we move forward with any other alternative design or change. Some of the things that were brought forward were some of the choices in color choices. There were that we have modified since based on those recommendations that have come forward from the teaching groups.
And if I may supplement through you, Mr. Chair, just in the recent round, we've discovered that the change rooms in elementary schools are just being used for storage, and not that they don't need more storage, but we've undertook revamping of that space so it becomes an extended area of the learning commons. So that stage area opens not only to the gymnasium, but also to that foyer area, so that small groups can present and use that. So that becomes a multi-purpose space. So we're always looking for innovative ways to improve the use of the space, and certainly we continue to be pressed by the ministry to reduce the size of schools and increase the number of sardines in the can, as I call it.
Thank you very much to you, Mr. Chair. Thank Mr. Woods for all your work. My question is going to be more about spec ed sort of stuff. And just as the big open spaces are with our kids with autism or sensory problems, they can have issues with the big spaces. So have you been able to find a way to give them their closed-in, quiet spaces?
Thank you for the question. Yes, on the design, on the plan, you can actually see we do have some smaller spaces. So we have withdrawal rooms, and we have some office or spec ed rooms, so areas of quiet area where they can take them. We'll also, and you'll go into a lot of these schools, you'll find that they have the bikes and they have the activity for them to be able to get those needs met. And then also with the lighting, they're able to dim the lighting in a lot of all the classrooms. So we've got it, the lighting is split, so the front teaching wall can be on while the other areas are off, and they can actually dim all of those sections.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Trustee Fallon and Trustee Simpson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just maybe one quick question. I think you made a comment about storage facilities in general, but while we try to, transform storage areas into more learning spaces, there's still a need, obviously, for storage spaces, correct? So is there any thought, sort of future planning wrapped around storage spaces in general? We have student councils, we have other members of the school community who require space for certain things throughout the year, just in general.
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly taking that into consideration across the whole district. So right now, for instance, with the outdoor learning, this summer we're planning to bring in some of the storage pod type of situation, or whatever, we can put some of that outdoor material safely outside rather than clutter indoors. So we are looking at that. The ministry continues to push us to build a smaller and smaller school, but yet still have the capacity. So, a lot of times it's through casework or millwork that, and again, the nice thing is that some of the paper products we're less reliant on that, and sometimes that, leveraging our digital piece with the interactive boards and technologies are certainly taken away from some of those hard copy pieces, even though the tactile piece is important, like for reading and whatnot, but a bit of more of a balance. So we're finding that there's less reliance on those hard pieces, and certainly teachers have to adapt that way.
Trustee Simpson.
Thank you for the presentation. It's always fun for me to see the evolution of schools. My first year teaching, I was in a school where there was not one single wall, and it was K to 6. So it's very interesting to see walls built and walls taken away. My only concern was that you said that you took away some space from some of the cloakrooms. And as a former teacher and principal, the cloakrooms were always an issue with being too small and too many little bodies in a room at the same time. Have you had feedback about how they're going to manage with a smaller cloakroom?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. It is one of those pieces where, those cloakrooms have been taken space out of the classroom at the back of the room. It's not ideal, but for the benefit of that collaborative space that we've created outside the classroom, for the little bit of space that's lost in the classroom, it creates more cleaning for us, of course, with the dirt coming into the space. But, I think it's one of those balances as to benefit for, you still have enough room in the classroom to have the teaching space, but that collaborative space is so valuable for the school. The school becomes more vibrant and dynamic. And so I think, losing those hallway spaces that you would add all those cloaks and boots and hats, it is kind of a wasted space when you look at the marvelous things that you get out of it now. So it is a bit of a cost benefit there.
Is there any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for your presentation, gentlemen. Can I get a mover and seconder? Trustee Fallon? Seconder, Trustee Warren? At the memorandum from the Superintendent of Planning and Facilities dated April 6, 2023, entitled Deep Learning Features in New School Designs be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Declarations of conflict of interest, seeing none. Confirmations of the minutes of the regular board meeting of March 28, 2023. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Simpson. And trustee on my right side, Lawrence. That the minutes of the regular board meeting of March 28, 2023 be adopted as presented. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's no unfinished business from previous meetings. There's no trustee motions. Item K1, presentation and consideration of committee reports, Committee of the Whole Board, April 11, 2023.
There are no recommendations to come forward.
Thank you. Item 2, memo from the Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services, SEAC, minutes of February 15, 2023. Superintendent Benton.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. These minutes are to be received.
Thank you. Can I get a mover, please? Trustee Lawrence and trustee Fallon. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services dated March 7th, 2023, entitled SEAC Minutes of February 15th, 2023 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Memo from trustee Joanne McEwen, President of the Ottawa Student Transportation Authority, re OSTA minutes of the regular session meeting of January 30th, 2023 and February 27th, 2023. Madam Vice Chair?
Minutes to be received?
Thank you. Would you like to move that?
Yep.
Seconder, please. Trustee Warren. That the memorandum from trustee Joanne McEwen dated April 6, 2023, entitled OSTA minutes in the regular session meetings of January 30th, 2023 and February 27th, 2023 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item L1, presentation and consideration of staff or trustee reports. Memo from the Superintendent of Leading and Learning, Learning Innovation Fund for Teachers, also known as LIFT. Although not part of the presentation, tonight's presentation, I'd like to thank Katie Lewis-Prier for her leadership and vision for a very successful first ever Standing Against Racism Week. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I am pleased to be joined here by Katie Lewis-Prior, Coordinator of the Leading and Learning Department. Katie will be sharing some highlights on the Learning Innovation Fund for Teachers, otherwise known as LIFT. And the purpose of these funds is to build capacity across our school system and to promote innovation. As Katie shares with you this presentation, you will see projects from all across our system, from K to 12, with an emphasis on deep learning. I now turn it over to Katie.
Good evening and thank you. I'm hoping I can be composed as I continue. Thanks so much for having me here to speak tonight about our OCSB Learning Innovation Fund for Teachers, otherwise known as LIFT. Next slide, please, Tim. I wanted to start by saying that the Ottawa Catholic School Board has a long history of funding innovation. For example, while we received formal funding from the ministry last year in the form of a one-year grant, we already had been supporting cutting-edge work through our Board Innovation Fund as far back as 2017-2018 school year. And when the LIFT grant came through for the 2021-22 school year from the ministry, we used our past model of the Innovation Fund, which is rooted in deep learning, as a launching point to continue the awesome work that our educators have been doing in the system. We've since shared our model on a ministry call to help other boards find their way, and I've had a couple of other school boards reach out for assistance as well. And I'm proud to say that even in the continuance of the pandemic last year, OCSB educators were still innovating and making changes in their teaching practices for improvement and engagement. We very fortunately received the same amount of funding this year for the Ministry of Education grant, and I'm very happy to share that this funding has now shifted to the annual grant for student needs, so hopefully it'll be around for a long time. This capacity building fund focuses on the Ministry of Education's priorities for the year, which include the areas of equity and inclusion education, learning recovery, STEM, and student and school safety. And these broad topics can be explored by our educators through many subtopics such as special education needs, de-streaming, skilled trades, environmental education, mental health and well-being, Indigenous education, and so much more. In September, interested OCSB educators put forth proposals that included requests for resources, professional training, and supply release. And you can also see on this slide the first of many pictures from St. Francis Xavier High School teacher Tyler McCaffrey documenting his project. Mr. McCaffrey's proposal involved learning new skills to share with his construction classes to keep the students engaged and on the leading edge of new techniques and skills. And the photos show the process and the progress of a resin table that he learned how to make in a specialized woodworking workshop at KJP Hardwoods that we funded. I might add that St. Francis Xavier also got a very beautiful table out of this. The process for obtaining LIFT funding started with a call for applications from our educators via Google Form, and we had very enthusiastic response from our OCSB educators. The fund was $45,000, and we had an excess of $80,000 in requests coming in. Once the deadline had passed, the LIFT Review Committee met. The review team was composed of staff from Planning and Facilities, Leading and Learning, both Student Success Departments, Learning Technologies, and Special Education. They first individually reviewed the applications for their merits so they would know what they wanted to advocate for when we met. And when we convened, they discussed the applications to see whether the deep learning global competencies were being addressed, as well as our board spiritual theme and Catholic graduate expectations. And then we made some hard decisions about choosing projects that were the most sustainable, innovative, and met the other criteria that we had set out. Once we'd notified the candidates, I set up Google Meets to review the budget information and how the educators would track their progress. We have asked our project leads for a warts and all report, as we learned so much more from the difficulties that the educators encounter, not just what goes swimmingly. I'm really looking forward to reviewing the slide decks, but they're not coming in to the end of June when they'll be submitted. This slide shares a snapshot of the response to the funding, and as I mentioned earlier, the response was quite positive, with 61 applications being submitted, of which we approved 18. It was so encouraging to see things returning to a more normal level of interest as we have moved through the pandemic. I'm also happy to mention that we reviewed the applications as a group, and we were able to shift some of the requests which didn't meet our LIFT merits to Experiential Learning Fund, OYAP, some of the student success consultants had funding, and through the Board Action Plan for Indigenous Education. This chart indicates the number of applications that were spread throughout the family of schools. And you'll notice the number doesn't add up to 18 because we did actually have an application from a CEC department staff member as well. This table indicates the spread by the ministry priority that the projects fell under. And you can see that STEM learning, which includes the skilled trades, was the most popular, followed by an even split of equity and inclusive education and learning, recovery, and renewal. When educators filled out their LIFT applications, we asked them to craft specific inquiry questions to guide where they wanted to go. Our team's attitude, though, is that learning is messy, and that this inquiry question, as well as the path to get where they are going, would shift as they dive into their learning journey with other staff. And here are some sample questions that you can see from the year that included exploring play with junior kindergarten students, shifting the use of non-permanent vertical surfaces as a means of collaborative learning in contemporary studies, and English education, rather than the traditional use in math class that we've seen quite a bit of, as well as additional learning for the skilled trades, this time for a hairstyling and aesthetics class to help keep up with current trends and promote career paths in the skilled trades. And here are some more inquiry questions, and these ones relate to special education. The first one I mentioned from a CEC staff member, a French language instruction model to help students who experience anxiety when speaking the French language. And finally, a project exploring literacy, numeracy, Indigenous studies, and our faith in outdoor learning, which is quite a big endeavor. As I mentioned, the inquiry slide decks will be submitted at the end of the school year, and I'm really looking forward to exploring them. Any residual funds that might be left over will go to be funding book club requests or requests for after school or weekend PD registration. And I'm so grateful that we've been able to do this again, and hopefully we'll be able to continue through the years. Thanks so much for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have now.
Thank you. Trustee Moore.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Katie. Congratulations on a successful week. I did have a little one tell me it was the best day ever.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Trustee Moore.
But to get down to this,
Yeah.
so there's some great projects and some great learning that's going to be happening. You're going to see pictures now. Is there any way to assess these projects to see about moving some of these ideas, whether it's grade level or board level?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's wonderful to get the feedback from the educators at the end of the system, and some of them have actually, as part of their process, we actually have one of the questions of the application saying, how are you going to spread this through the system? And so some of them are doing it through staff meetings at their schools. Some of them are sharing across the board with people who in particular might teach the same subject that they do. So there's a lot of that cross-pollination happening naturally, but as I get to go through all of the reports, if anything stands out, it's something that I'm able to definitely move forward with.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Simpson.
I just wanted to make a comment. First of all, congratulations. It's so wonderful to see all the departments collaborating, but one thing that I found was really strong was that you were able to take some applications and send them to different departments so that you got as many projects funded as possible, so congratulations on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Trustee Simpson.
Seeing no more questions, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And congrats. Can I have a mover, please, for the motion? Trustee Moore? And Trustee Phelan? Is that the memorandum from the superintendent? I'm having a problem with that word tonight. Superintendent of Leading and Learning dated April 4th, 2023, entitled Learning Innovation Fund for Teachers be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 2, memo from the Associate Director of Business Affairs re the 2023-2024 budget process and guidelines. Welcome, Superintendent Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, Associate Director Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So tonight we have 2 memos on the board meeting that begins our presentation of the budget processes. The first memo, I'm sorry, before you is the 23-24 budget process and the guidelines for the timelines. So the memo before you is a standard budget process memo with expected timelines for reporting. Working with the end in mind, the budget deadline to be approved by the board and filed with the ministry is the end of June. And our expected approval date has traditionally been the first board meeting in June. So for this year, that is June 13th, we will be looking to approve the board budget. The process for gathering input began in February with the trustee budget priorities being collected on February 14th. Input from public and other stakeholders through written submissions and presentations such as CSPA, PIC, and SEAC at our last board meeting. And student trustees' information will be collected at their meeting this Thursday at the Student Senate. Finance staff has been collecting departmental and staffing information since January and has been finalizing the incorporation of that data into the department budgets as well as the salary and benefit budget projections in preparation for presentation to the board at future meetings. The board receives the budget in bite-sized portions throughout our meetings, beginning tonight and through until June 13th, as the information becomes available and is compiled. The timelines for what schedules are being presented at which board meetings can be found in the contents of your memo tonight on pages 9 and 10, with the final option for balancing the budget coming to you on May 23rd and June 13th. And I just say subject to the timely receipt and contents of the GSNs, the Grants for Student Needs, which we've yet to receive. On that note, the GSNs, the ministry has been reporting that the GSNs are expected to be released in accordance with the normal schedule this year. Speculation by the sector is this will happen by the end of April. The messaging that has been coming from the government is that things are beginning to return to normal. And with that in mind, we've been advised that the $6.5 million in transitional funding in the current year's budget that assists with the COVID learning recovery will not be continued for next year's budget. This is a concern as it represents slightly more than 1% of the board's overall budget. However, we are hopeful that there will be some alternative relief in the GSNs to soften this loss of funding. At this stage, budgeting is a process, and I emphasize process. There are still a number of unknowns, particularly the GSNs, so we are being cautious in planning, finding necessary savings wherever possible, but being optimistic that we will be able to present to you a compliant budget without the need to disrupt our progress as we return back to normal operations and funding levels in the longer term. I'll speak more to that when I speak to enrollments in the next memo. And that is my report, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Trustee Simpson.
Just a comment. I thank you so very much. This is so very clear. I feel like it's budgeting for dummies, which is exactly what I need. So just thank you, because it's always so clear and we know exactly where we are.
Trustee Moore.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Associate Director, thank you. I had a quick question, because as we just heard, LIFT has been added to the GSNs. Have we had news on many programs yet being added?
So thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. LIFT was actually added to the GSNs, I believe, last year. It's already incorporated into the GSN, so that would be for the current year. We don't have any notice of any new funding that will be included in the upcoming GSNs as yet, other than we have been advised that to expect a new transportation formula to be released.
Is there any other questions or comments? Everybody spoken? Trustee Moore.
Thanks. I was more just asking if you had any sort of a date on this transportation formula, because the buses don't roll till September, so they got time, I know that.
Stay tuned. Soon and return to normal are the catchwords for the release of the GSNs and the timeline for when they might be released. So,
Seeing no more questions, can I have a mover, please? Trustee Coburn. Seconded by Trustee Lawrence. That the memorandum from the Associate Director of Business Affairs dated April 5th, 2023, entitled 2023-2024 Budget Process and Guidelines be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second part of Associate Director's presentation, read the 23-24 preliminary budget information. Associate Director Shimmons.
thank you, Mr. Chair. So this begins the preliminary budget information, and it's pretty standard information that we have at this time of year. It includes the Section C, which is the budget guidelines, which are draft at this point and will be returned when we have anything new that might be added to that for the GSN release. It includes the enrollment statistics that we base our staffing and our budgeting projections on, as well as the debenture data information. So it is pretty standard, 3 preliminary reports at this time, as it's very early that we're putting the numbers together. So I will just speak briefly to each of those sections, beginning with Section C, which is the budget guidelines, if you'd like to click into that section. These guidelines come to you as draft, and as I mentioned, will be updated with the final budget pending any changes that come as part of the GSNs that would include new enveloping and reporting requirements. The guidelines come from the trustee board level guidance, i.e. to balance the budget, from the ministry requirements, which is the enveloping, and from meeting our contractual obligations, be it the collective agreements, debt repayments, or other service contracts. The ministry provides for funding within the GSNs that place requirements upon how funds are to be spent to meet the funding intent, and also requires boards to report on that funding, both quantitatively and qualitatively, to ensure the goals of that funding are being met. Details of the various enveloping and reporting requirements can be found in the report, with the major driver of the budget being the class size targets, given that classroom salaries compose approximately 60% of the overall board budget. New for the 23-24 year is the 3-year transition for the new e-learning graduation requirement and related class size and its funding adjustments. So the e-learning requirement provides for a class size of 30 as opposed to the 23 that are part of the normal in-person learning. For 23-24, more secondary sections will be offered via e-learning to respond to those students to meet the e-learning graduation requirement. And the ministry had originally released, they expected for the upcoming year, expected 26% of students in this year would be part of the new e-learning model. However, at this time, while we're using that percentage as a placeholder, until the GSNs are released and we hear what the final funding adjustment is, we'll be reporting back at that time. So if I can have you now click into section D, which is our enrollment projections, our enrollment statistics. For 2022-23, the current year, we are currently recording an in-year increase of 1,167 students, or 2.6%. While looking forward to the 23-24, the planning department is projecting an increase of 1,119 students, or 2.4%. The growth rate trend can be seen by the yellow line on the graph, and you can quite clearly see the impact of the pandemic on enrollments, and therefore the overall board funding, which is driven by pupil enrollment. Our enrollment projection growth for next year, 23-24, is beginning to return to pre-pandemic levels and sits at 2.4%, with the 3 years following that, 24 through 26, sitting an average of 2.2%. Enrollment projections are compiled by our planning department with the assistance of principals, as well as statistical data sources. And the projections are based on a 3-year trending data, which of course has been challenging these past few years, given the pandemic and parents choosing to keep students home. Similarly, when looking at the granular enrollment data on a school-by-school basis, the continued movement of students between the virtual academy back into in-person learning can reflect an increase in the buildings that simply are a shift from the virtual school to the school and buildings without an actual overall increase in enrollment. But we are returning to some normal trending. All this said, the planning department is cautiously optimistic with these projections, and the department have generally been hearing about upward pressures in schools to date, so that's good news. It is a continuous process, however, and a full review will begin again shortly after we have the secondary course selections in and any of the registrations, first round of kinder registrations, and the revised enrollments will be used to determine staffing adjustments based on needs in June, again in August, and again in September for the final adjustments. Additionally, I might mention that the federal government has announced a continuous increase in immigration targets over the past 2 years. We know during the pandemic that the freeze on immigration did have an impact on our enrollments. So on that basis, because of that effect, we're hopeful that this increase in immigration will support further enrollment growth in the future for our board. And lastly, if I can ask you to click into section I, which is the debenture debt information. This one's even more straightforward. So section I reflects the debenture debt outstanding for the next 5 years and is broken out into principal and interest. It's fairly straightforward in the board that we're no longer issuing debt, as capital is now funded by the ministry directly through their capital grants model. So our last debenture that we issued was 2016. So this debt originated prior to the ministry taking over capital funding, and was done at a time when boards were required to issue debentures to pay for capital improvements and new builds. So this schedule reflects debt that was issued under the old model, and so the outstanding balance will just continue to decline as we pay it down. The bad news is we won't see the last of this until 2041. The good news is the ministry fully funds the annual debt payments, both principal and interest, through the GSNs. So it's an in and an out in our books for a net zero bottom line and is shown here for information purposes. And that completes my preliminary budget information report to the board, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Trustee Warren.
And more. Oh, they should. Through Mr. Chair, thanks. I think you said more. Do you know, and even though it's a slight decrease in year over year, do you know why that we're probably projecting a slight decrease with enrollment?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So the enrollment projections are created in October and then again revised in January and February with the inclusion of the principal input. So while the current year is showing a 2.6% growth rate, when the projections were done, we were still very cautiously optimistic, still very cautious about the enrollment. So by the time we come to the end of June, if those enrollments reflect that we're growing at 2.6 for the 23-24 year, we will make adjustments to staffing, and we'll make the related incorporated adjustments as part of the revenue as well. But right now, those enrollments were created at a time with the information that we had on the ground at that time. We also seen in the current year quite an increase in growth from our original projections as we've seen more students returning to the buildings as well. So hopeful that that continues through, but we still have to be cautious with our projections.
No, thank you.
Trustee Simpson.
Thank you very much. I really like this fulsome information about each school and what the percentage increase and decrease is. However, I think I'd be more informed if I knew what the capacity of each school was, because there are some smaller schools that, although their enrollment is going down, they're not at 20% capacity. They're still at 50 or 60% capacity, where some of the other schools, as their enrollment goes up, they're maybe at 130. It was just be extra information that we could have an idea about what some of the trends are in our schools, so that the schools that we need to watch as the capacity is growing, we know ahead of time.
Thank you. If I can respond to that, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Actually, that's a discussion that we just had a very recent, and Mr. Baxter behind me is probably smiling because we had it this morning again. It's a very good comment. That would be something that we could easily add to that chart, and it would be very good information because many of our schools are operating very close to capacity. So I'll take that note and we'll make those adjustments.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Moore? Seconder? Trustee Simpson? With the memorandum from the Associate Director of Business Affairs dated April 5th, 2023, entitled 2023-2024 Preliminary Budget Information and Accompanying Budget Documentation be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item L4, memo from the Superintendent of Planning Facilities re St. Joseph High School and St. Mother Teresa High School proposed attendance boundary revisions consultation document. Welcome, Superintendent Bella and Mr. Baxter.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight our preliminary consultation approach to the St. Joe's boundary, attendance boundary, and then we have Manager Baxter here to go through some of the details.
Thank you, Superintendent Valla, and good evening, everyone. Through you, Mr. Chair, trustees have in front of them a memo requesting board approval for the commencement of a consultation process regarding proposed revisions to the attendance boundaries of St. Joseph and St. Mother Teresa High Schools, and to obtain approval for the use of the included document as the basis for the receipt of public comment. So these revisions are being proposed in order to manage future accommodation pressures at St. Joseph, better balance enrollment between the two schools, and make best use of available local classroom space. Currently, all secondary students residing in the larger South Nepean area are served by a combination of both schools. St. Mother Teresa was opened in 1998 on a site located in the northern portion of the Longfields neighborhood, adjacent to Ken Ross Park. At the time, I think it was known as South Nepean Park. The school currently serves students residing in a boundary that includes the Knowlesbrook section of Old Barhaven and the Longfields-Davidson Heights area. St. Joseph High School was opened 4 years later in 2002 on a site located south of Strandherd Drive on Greenbank Road. The school currently serves students residing in the rest of the entirety of South Nepean, an area that includes a vast majority of the remaining residential development potential. These attendance areas have been in place for a number of years now and have served local students and families well. We're at a point now, however, when a review and a consideration of changes is needed. Student enrollment at these two schools over the next 5 years is projected to move forward in very different directions. Enrollment at St. Joseph currently totals just over 2,100 students in a school with a permanent capacity of 1,937 pupils. And these numbers are forecast to increase rapidly in the coming years as a result of, a real increase over the past 3 years in the number of new homes that are being built and occupied. Conversely, a gradual projected decrease in enrollment at St. Mother Teresa during the same period is forecasted, and this will result in an increase in the school's surplus instructional space. We are proposing a revision to the attendance areas of both secondary schools that would redirect elementary students residing in the St. Patrick and St. Elizabeth Ann Seton elementary school boundaries from St. Joseph to St. Mother Teresa. Students residing in the St. Patrick boundary currently have an option to choose to attend either school for grade 7. The option to attend St. Joseph would be removed under the proposal. Students residing in the current St. Elizabeth Ann Seton attendance area would be directed to St. Mother Teresa instead of St. Joseph. We are proposing that these revised attendance boundaries take effect for September of 2024. In order to limit disruption, existing students who reside within the redirected boundary areas and are already attending St. Joseph High School would be provided with a one-time option to remain at the school. New secondary students to the system and those who have older siblings already attending St. Joseph would be directed to attend St. Mother Teresa. A public consultation process with potentially affected school communities and the larger public is proposed to take place generally over the next 8 months or so. This process will include the school communities of St. Joseph, St. Mother Teresa, St. Patrick, and St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. We are planning to hold a public meeting with school communities regarding the proposal in the cafetorium at St. Joseph High School on Thursday, September 28th, 2023. Notice of the consultation and the public meeting will be distributed to schools and the public via regular board social media channels. A dedicated web page will also be created to post supporting information and updates and communicate with parents and guardians. This page will include an FAQ section that will provide answers to commonly asked questions that are received during the consultation process. A recommendation report regarding the proposals contained within this document is expected to be brought forward to the board for final approval at a meeting in November of 2023 following completion of the public process. In preparing the proposed boundary revisions, staff wanted to ensure that we had a regard for the locations of the two existing schools and the potential future opening of a third secondary school in the Barhaven South area. We also wanted to consider the location of future new homes. A vast majority of the new residential development potential that remains in South Nepean is located in the area south of Strandherd Drive. Given its close proximity to St. Joseph, a difficult decision was the redirection of that portion of the current St. Elizabeth Ann Seton attendance area located south of Strandherd Drive to St. Mother Teresa. Strandherd Drive makes longer-term sense as the southern attendance boundary for St. Mother Teresa, especially when the need for a third secondary school arises in the future. But notwithstanding this, being able to effectively manage the enrollment levels at St. Joseph was deemed an important consideration. The school is currently experiencing some operational issues in accommodating higher enrollments, a reduction in common space for students, parking availability, a high number of yellow buses on site, peak period site congestion and vehicular circulation, and some pedestrian access concerns. I think if there are questions, I'll leave things there. And if there are questions from trustees regarding the report, staff are here to answer them tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Warren.
Thanks, through Mr. Chair. I appreciate the effort you put through this. Great presentation. I understand the difficulty it is to kind of, especially with Barrhaven, the rapid growing community it is. So some of the concerns that are going to come up, obviously, is with the south boundary of Strandherd, where the houses are literally across the street from St. Joe's. So one of the things that makes it hard for us to determine, if this is the most logical approach, is the population base. And what would help is if we had a heated map to kind of show us what that population density looks like in the different pockets. Right now, looking at this, I can't tell if there's a lot of population in that particular area they're proposing to move forward. Have you considered looking at the St. Emily's direction, because that's on the other side of Longfields, more in the direction towards St. Mother Teresa? That area to me would make more sense. It's a dense population, but it's also in the same routing area as St. Mother Teresa. I know you probably thought of every angle. I'm wondering if there's other proposals that we can look at, or is this the one only that you've finalized on? Because it's going to be a hard sell, and I know the community will come back and fight this because they've already been, voicing their concerns. The fact that they're right across the street from St. Joe's, how do you defend that, right? So that will be probably one of the toughest boundary discussions we've had with any of the high schools or any of the schools in general. So it'd be nice if we kind of were able to look at maybe other options or other options that you proposed or haven't proposed to see if, if we've thought this through the best way possible. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and in response to the trustee question. So I think both of those issues in terms of the area south of Strandherd Drive, the St. Elizabeth Ann Seton area, are mentioned, and also the idea of potentially not using Strandherd Drive, but maybe using Greenbank Road and Longfields and Jockvale as maybe a different division between the two schools. Those were both mentioned, I think, in the other options considered. I think what we could do as the process, we have time, to dive in deeper. And like I said, we're going to put together sort of an FAQ section to assist, to assist parents and provide them with some additional information. I think that would be probably the site where we could add some of that information as well. And in terms of, this is the beginning of the consultation process. From my perspective, when we mention other options considered, and I think the wording in the report that talks about that, especially that area south of Strandherd Drive, really, and I think the comments that I made this evening tell you that that was a very difficult decision, and one where, again, sort of a balance, a difficult decision had to be made around the impact on St. Joseph and the concerns around the enrollment levels and really what made sense on the ground. So, one of the things we did look at is making that an optional area between the two schools. And that would allow also kids at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, grade 6 kids, if they were to choose to stay together, could do so at St. Mother Teresa. So we've looked at all of those things, and but I think it's a good it's a good point in terms of maybe adding additional information onto that webpage, that study webpage, as we move forward.
Thanks, through you, Mr. Chair. No, I understand the verbiage when you had written around the other options and stuff. More of a visual, I think, would help just for that. But I think what the key part missing from this, for us to help have facilitate the conversation is having that the data to show, like a heat map or something, to show when we're looking at this, what is the dense populations? Are we talking, okay, across the street from St. Joe's, we're only talking about very small populations, so it's kind of a non-issue, or is it a heavy dense population? So, I mean, some of that information, I think, is just probably crucial for at least to have that conversation.
Trustee Moore.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, can I ask that when you're putting together these questions, that you go to the school councils and ask for their concerns directly, so that they feel they have a part of it before they start making decisions for next year? If it could be done this spring, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and in response to the trustee question, we can certainly canvass and connect with those school councils directly and those chairs.
Is there any other questions? I have a couple of comments that there's 150,000 houses going to be built in the next 10 years. And Barrhaven is growing leaps and bounds. So I understand where you're saying, and my day job, I'm out there daily. But it's also important that we realize that today we're deciding on what questions are going to be asked. We're not making recommendations for the attendance boundaries today. So the input is good to give to these two gentlemen, so when they have their consultations, they ask the right questions. So this isn't a dialogue that ends today. If you have other information, both of them are nodding their heads, get a hold of them, and we share information so that when they're meeting with the parents and the public, that they have the questions to represent us. Trustee Warren.
Just to follow up to that, thank you, through Mr. Chair. No, I understand that. I know we're not making decisions today. I think it was more about, I just want to make sure we put the right foot forward going in, so we're setting ourselves up for success in the consultation period, which you guys have always done a fantastic job of this. I'll never question in the sense of, you know, the thought that you put into these things. I don't want you to think it's an attack on that. I just want to, it's hard for us to kind of look at this without having that information. And I know the comments we're getting from some of the parents, it's going to be probably, this will probably be one of the toughest ones that we've ever had, because of the fact that it's literally across the street from the high school, right? So I just want to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success. Thanks.
Seeing no more questions, can I have a mover, please? Trustee Warren, seconded by Trustee Phelan. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Planning Facilities dated April 5th, 2023, entitled St. Joseph High School and St. Mother Teresa High School Proposed Attendance Boundary Revisions Document, Consultation Document be received, and that the proposal contained therein form the basis for public comment, and the potentially impacted schools and parent councils be advised of the proposal and the consultation process, and provided with the avenues to submit their feedback, and that the following completion of the public consultation process, a recommendation regarding the proposal be brought back to the Board of Trustees for a final decision. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item L5, memo from the Superintendent of Planning and Facilities, New Fernbank High School Temporary Accommodation Plan Consultation Document. Superintendent Vallon. Mr. Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and subject to what our Associate Director Shimmons had stated, we're in a place where we've got added growth every year, and we're in a fortunate state that we're blessed with more kids and keep up with the budgets and dollars that come up. But with that comes the challenges around some of our accommodation pressures, especially in our high schools. So it's our second report tonight around reviewing the accommodation reviews and what we're going to do with those students in those communities. Again, we have Manager Baxter here to go through some of the details for our next consultation plan for the, this is the Fernbank community. Through Mr. Baxter.
Thank you again, Superintendent Valla. Through you, Mr. Chair, trustees have in front of them a memo requesting board approval again, for the commencement of another consultation process affecting secondary schools, this one to address the accommodation pressures currently being experienced at Holy Trinity High School and Sacred Heart High School. We are providing you with a consultation document this evening that includes a proposed plan for the temporary accommodation of students in advance of the opening of a new secondary school in the Fernbank development area, and to obtain approval for its use as the basis for the receipt of public comment. You will recall that in February of 2022, a new Fernbank Catholic High School was identified as the board's #1 capital priority. Although not yet approved for funding by the ministry, we are proposing to manage the pressures at Holy Trinity and Sacred Heart by establishing a preliminary attendance boundary for this future new school to be built at the corner of Cope Drive and Atlas Terrace. Students residing in the preliminary attendance boundary would be temporarily accommodated at All Saints High School until they can be relocated to the new school in Fernbank when it is opened in the future. Along with Holy Trinity and Sacred Heart, All Saints is one of 3 secondary schools that serve the western portion of the city. Keeping students accommodated in local schools and making best use of available permanent instructional space is an important part of this plan. The proposed boundary for the new school would be comprised of the current St. Martin de Porres Elementary School attendance area and that of the new St. Bernadette Catholic Elementary School, scheduled to open in September of 2023. The creation of this new boundary would impact future enrollments at Holy Trinity, Sacred Heart, and All Saints. We are proposing that the new boundaries would be effective for the 2024-2025 school year. In order to limit disruption, existing students who reside within the new boundary area and are already attending either Holy Trinity or Sacred Heart would be provided with a one-time option to remain at those schools. New students living in the new boundary area would be directed to All Saints, and students who have older siblings attending either Holy Trinity or Sacred Heart would also be directed to All Saints. A public consultation process with potentially affected school communities and the larger public would take place over the next 8 months. In order to account for the timing of the opening of St. Bernadette, Holy Spirit Elementary School will also be included in the process. We're planning to hold a public meeting with school communities regarding the proposal in the cafetorium at Holy Trinity on Thursday, October 5th, 2023. Again, notice of the consultation and the public meeting would be distributed to schools and the public via regular board social media channels. A dedicated web page will also be created to post supporting information and updates and communicate with parents and guardians, and that page will also include an FAQ section. Following completion of the public consultation process, a recommendation report regarding the proposals contained within this document is expected to be brought forward to the board for final approval at a meeting in November 2023. And again, that would be for implementation for the following September of 2024. It should be noted that the document contains proposed minor revisions to the current attendance boundaries of St. Paul High School and St. James and Our Lady of Peace Elementary Schools. Given the nature of the changes, these schools will not be formally involved in the process, but will be made aware and provided with avenues to submit any concerns or questions. I think it is understood that the future opening of a new Fernbank Catholic Secondary School is an essential part of a larger plan to support the long-term accommodation needs of students residing in this part of the city. There's nothing that we have heard from the ministry to date that would suggest that the project is not supported. Due to the volume of residential development growth in the Canada and Stittsville areas, status quo projected enrollments can no longer be accommodated at Sacred Heart and Holy Trinity. These school sites have exhausted their capacity for the placement of additional portable classrooms beyond the 2023-2024 school year, and change is now required. Although we understand that this type of change comes with real on-the-ground disruption, this plan is an attempt to keep students and families accommodated locally and to limit that change to areas we are confident will be directed to the new school. Although we don't have information with regard to why the ministry has chosen not to fund the project to date, this plan would serve to make use of all secondary space available within the local area. This is one of the criteria that the province examines as part of its independent capital priority review process. I think with that, I'll leave things there, and if there are questions from trustees, staff are here tonight to answer them.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Again, I would reiterate that this is not a recommendation to be passed this evening on boundaries. One, we have no funding, but as well, it's to get questions for the consultation. Trustee Moore.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. I really don't understand why when we're going to build Fernbank 2 Elementary School, which is on our priority list, I believe, that it's a real big deal that we would be splitting up a cohort across Terry Fox. I would like you to maybe look at that because I think that's a big deal to our parents, and so far I've been hearing about people moving boards over this. It's a big deal. The whole distance and transportation I've been hearing about, but I think that's a lot more in your FAQs will come out, a lot of that stuff. And again, if you would please contact the parent councils and get their questions. And parents are also going to be wanting a lot more information at this end about the schisms that and transferable between the different ones. And a lot of things I haven't thought of yet, but the parents are going to have a lot of ideas on this. And one of the things that our maps don't show is around St. Anne's and all the areas out there. That's National Capital Commission land, so it's not changing. The other side of Hope Road is the gold farmland, so it's going to be the last to go. And that they're already starting to build. So yes, I know the pressures are real because I've seen the tractors out there putting in the houses already. So thanks.
Trustee Simpson.
Just a point of clarification. I'm looking at Appendix C, the map, and I just want to make sure I've got this clear in my own mind that the proposed preliminary new Fernbank Catholic High School boundary, you're proposing that anyone within that boundary now attend Sacred Heart to alleviate pressure on the other two high schools. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think what you're asking is students who are either attending, who reside in that area currently or for the 23-24 school year and are attending either Sacred Heart or Holy Trinity, those students would have a one-time option to remain at those schools and finish out.
All right, but then any new registrations within that area would then go to All Saints?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay. Supplemental? Just a quick for your thoughts. More and more, the OSTA is finding that we're having to give OC Transpo passes to high school students. I know that there are some high schools going to be moving in that direction in the fall. Has any thought been given to, are there OC Transpo routes that go between this area and over to All Saints? Because that could be an impediment to the plan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that is an area in more detail that we will certainly include in the FAQ section and certainly connect with OSTA to receive that information.
Trustee Fallon.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a quick question wrapped around consultation date. Is it possible that we might be able to move that up? Just early feedback from the community is suggesting that maybe October is too far of a date to have a consultation. If we could advance something up for the families that could be affected or could be considered moving sort of geographies based on the public consultation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in response to the trustee question, we actually originally were looking at a June date, you know, in terms of having those public meetings. An early June date, we chose late September, early October into the fall for a couple of reasons, given the implementation date of September of 2024, but also in terms of secondary schools and the month of June just being a very busy one with exams, maybe not the best time to have a public consultation meeting. We certainly could look at, you know, the possibility, nothing is cast in stone in terms of the dates here. We could certainly look at that. I'm not sure what the sweet spot would be. We have a Riverside South consultation happening toward the end of April. We're sort of beginning to run out of time, but we could certainly look at that as well. And that may be one of the pieces of feedback that we receive from families and from the public. So.
Is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Lawrence. Trustee Phelan. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Planning Facilities dated April 5th, 2023, entitled New Furbank High School Temporary Accommodation Plan Consultation Document be received, and that the proposal contained therein form the basis of the public comment, and the potentially impacted schools and parent councils be advised to the proposal and the consultation process and provided with avenues to submit their feedback, and the following completion of the public consultation process, a recommendation regarding the proposal be brought back to the Board of Trustees for final decision. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 6, memo from the Superintendent of Planning Facilities, award of contract, New Riverside South Elementary School. Gentlemen.
Thanks again, through you, Mr. Chair. It's our, looking at the timelines with this report coming to board for approval. We're within a year of when we received the capital priority announcement, so we've moved quite quickly with this project, and we're quite seeing the rewards of some of the advocacy that we had to get an ATP from the province to move forward these projects. Earlier in the evening, I did make a presentation with Don Wood on our repeat design, and with that, the industry was solicited for pricing on both this project and for our Finley Creek site. The Finley Creek project closes the tender tomorrow, which we're optimistic that it will be similar pricing that we have with this one here. So last Thursday, March 30th, we received bids. So last Thursday, the week before that, here at the CEC, and we had 4 compliant bidders with pricing that was, very close and very competitive. The low bidder that we had was Hein Construction. They've done work with us before. As you may recall, they built St. Isabel School for us back in 2018 in Canada North. Our architects have reviewed the bids and find them to be in compliance. Our architect, Pi Richards Temprano Young, have given us a letter of recommendation that the bid is in fact compliant and that we are able to enter into a CCDC2 lump sum stipulated price contract. So we bring forward to you the request for approval to award the contract to the low bidder, which is Hein Construction, for the amount of $17,699,000 plus tax, which is within the approved ATP by the ministry. So we are on budget, and we are also on schedule. We're still optimistic that we will be able to open the school in a year. That'd be September 2024. So, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Okay, I have one. The previous schools we built of this design layout, what's the, how much has the price increased over the last 3 to 5 years?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've seen probably in the 10 to 15% range from previous one. This one here, I believe, is only about $500,000 more than last May. We were expecting it to be probably closer to an 8% increase. So we're fortunate that the numbers have stayed pretty steady. I think we've reached the high water mark with the construction pricing, and it'll be shown, I guess, as we move forward with the next project. So we're optimistic. So when you look at this one here, I think we're about 3% over last year, and we were anticipating probably closer to 8%. So the numbers have come up quite a bit through the pandemic, but they seem to be stabilizing at this point.
Good news, and we're fully funded. Great. Trustee Simpson.
I'm just curious, what kind of process is pre-qualifying to be able to put in a tender? And the reason I ask that is someone has a low bid, but we were not, we have experiences with them in the past that they were not, I'm not saying this has anything to do with this, but if it was someone who is pre-qualified, but in the past we've not had a good relationship with, is there anything in the pre-qualification process that eliminates that contractor?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is a process to review the contractors as far as performance. They do get removed. In fact, if they, we've had some challenges with some contractors recently that get removed on the annual basis on the refresh if they haven't performed. There's that evaluation piece that takes place. And the pre-qualification also on whether it's a 1-year or 4-year process with a renewal, there are a variety of pieces both on, financial qualifications, staffing, experience, so that by the time we go through the list of contractors for that specific type of work, we have confidence that they can perform. So, and there are only so many within the city. So in this case, we had 5 bidders, only 4 were compliant, and I believe there were 8 that actually came in and took drawings. So it's not like we have, everybody in the country looking for bidding on it. They have to first pre-qualify and be on our bidders list.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. Moved by Trustee Warren, seconded by Trustee Phelan. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Planning and Facilities dated April 5th, 2023, entitled Award of Contract, read New Riverside South Elementary School, be received and subject to satisfactory conclusion of certain contractual matters and the contract for construction of the New Riverside South Elementary School be awarded to Hind Construction in the amount of $17,699,000 plus HST. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen. No new business, no notice of motions. Confirmation of the action report for March 28, 2023, please. Movers, Trustee Simpson. Seconded by Trustee Lawrence.
Sure.
The action report covering the period of March 28, 2023 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Inquiries? None. Administrative announcements. Mr. Director? None?
None, thank you.
Bewitching hour. Who'd like to move adjournment? Trustee Coburn. And on my right side? Trustee Moore. That the regular board meeting of April 11th, 2023 be adjourned at 8:29 p.m. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.